Hello. That's a very serious picture of me. So, I'm Binji, NFT lead. I work at OP Labs, and I want to tell you all about the Superchain. Before I start, I just want to say thank you for being here. Honestly, this industry it gets better and better. There's such talented folks here, and thank you for being here in this moment. It's lovely to share this space with you all. But before I start as well, could you raise your hand if you've heard of the Superchain before, if you're familiar with it? Could you keep your hand up if you feel like you're very familiar? Okay, awesome. All right. Hopefully this helps. So to start off with, the future is Superchain. That is what we are trying to build. And we're doing it together with a whole host of people. So it's not just one team per se. It's actually a big, large group of individuals across the space that are contributing to it. And I want to go about this by going through an analogy. So what is a Superchain? Why does it need to exist? What can it do? What can it do for you? What can it do for users? What can it do for crypto? So I'm going to start with a sneaker analogy. So I want you all to think let's imagine we're all going to start a sneaker store, right? We're going to sell shoes. In this case, Ethereum is the sneaker store. So essentially the sneakers are block space. And we can imagine that's how we're starting, right? So we're going on this journey right now. We're going to sell sneakers to the world. We open up a store in Istanbul. That's our first flagship store. That's our L1. And we start the store. No one's coming. It's 2016. No one wants these sneakers. No one wants this block space just yet. And we're a little upset. We're okay, we worked hard for this, but no one wants it yet. But suddenly, 2017 comes. Whoa, people are interested. There's people building on top of this. There's sneakers are selling and whatnot. And over time, it gets a bit crowded. Now there's too many people. Now we have that problem. We have one store, and it's our L1 store, and people are mad. They're waiting in line. Gas fees are high. They're a little upset. So now we think okay, how can we fix this? We have this sneaker store. How can we scale the sneaker store but still have our brand, still sell our sneakers? So we're come with this idea of opening up a warehouse. So in this case, in this analogy, the warehouse is L2. The warehouse is OP mainnet, right? So what OP mainnet does here is it actually allows you to sell more sneakers under the same brand, right? The Ethereum L1. And essentially now there's more happy customers. You can serve more folks. Things get cheaper. Gas is cheaper, faster, et cetera. If you, on the technical side, you can almost think of this analogy as the call data that you send to L1 is essentially the receipts to prove that to the warehouse, to the L1 store owner, that this warehouse is actually selling what it says it's selling, right? That the inventory is the same and reporting back. And proofs are can offer disputes for the L1 essentially. So now we have this warehouse, right? We're selling, there's more folks getting access to this, it's gotten better. Maybe there's even interesting sneakers that can be created that couldn't be created before, similar to how L2s open up a lot of innovation within smart contracts. But even this warehouse has a lot of demand growing. This is, maybe it's not serving all types of customers yet. This is a warehouse near Istanbul, but what about a warehouse in Japan? What about a warehouse in another part of the world? What about a warehouse that specifies and is really good at one particular type of sneaker? So that question comes up as this scales even more and as sneaker demand increases, aka block space demand. So we think about should this same team that made the first warehouse also make another warehouse? But then what happens when that gets we need more sneakers from there? So this question kind of comes about, how do you actually scale this at this point where we are today? So the idea here is instead of creating another warehouse, what if you actually created a blueprint for warehouses in general that anyone could use? So that is essentially the MIT licensed OP stack, right? It's a blueprint for anyone to create an L2 that's been tried, that's been tested, and essentially allows for anyone to go and spin up their own rollup permissionlessly as well. So now anyone can kind of take this blueprint, create a warehouse. You can create one in Japan. You can create one anywhere in the world, and essentially make your own L2. But now there's essentially dozens of warehouses. We have warehouses all over the world. We got all of these OP stack chains, various different teams. I've lost count at how many there are right now, but there's a ton of these OP stack chains. And what that means is there's more distribution of this warehouse blueprint. There's more specialization in some, maybe there's app chains, et cetera, that are launching. and there's more of a global reach. So all of those are factors to scaling the sneakers itself and like having Ethereum block space more available for everybody. However, what if we could go even further than that, where it's not just like one warehouse here, one warehouse there, and like all these disconnected warehouses? What if we could actually make it a bit bigger? What if we can actually connect them all together? What if we can share progress with each other? What if we can like really, really push the extent of like how much we can coordinate to its fullest and actually have this shared growth together? That's the superchain, right? So the superchain is, I mean, I'm really pushing with this warehouse analogy, but the superchain is basically a global network, in this analogy again, of warehouses sharing advancements, fulfillment, and development, all for advancing the original sneaker, which is the L1 block space, right? So this is what Optimism, in collaboration with all of these OP chains that are part of the superchain, like Base, are building together, right? So what if we have all these warehouses, they're all using the same blueprint, now let's connect them and let's share this progress, let's do this all together and expand the pie, essentially. So, what does this mean in like a larger sense as well for another team? Like, let's say you're building like a DA layer or you're building like a shared sequencing thing. What exactly does this like interconnected warehouse world lead to? It allows for distribution. So what I want to say as an example here is essentially because everyone is using the same blueprint and because of the superchain teams are actually like sharing that blueprint, upgrading that blueprint, having like essentially like standards being shared across it. What that means is if you're building like a modular component and your modular component finds its way into the blueprint, you actually go across all of these different chains. So you get distribution. So instead of having to build for like multiple different chains, if you build for the OP stack, if you build like join the superchain, well, I'll go into how after. You essentially get distribution across all those OP chains. So a kind of a quote here that goes with it is, the power of many minds usurps the genius of one. What that essentially means is instead of having one team only contributing to a stack, what if we had all the teams contributing? What if we could all work together on something, share that, go forward together, and have a very like strong path to scaling crypto to the billions of users that we want to scale it to. So let's see some examples of developments happening on the superchain today. So here's a couple. It's pretty extensive. I think what happens when you have a stack that's open and has like various different ways that people can contribute, you end up getting quite a lot of things. So these are just some examples. Shout out like Espresso, RPGF, some of our ambassadors, Base, Zora, EAS, like, obviously like Zero, O1 Labs. These are all advancements happening on this shared stack. So this blueprint is growing, right? And like what that essentially means is like joining this blueprint system, joining this OP stack thing, and then opting to join the superchain means you get all of this in one go. Like you get all of this shared progress in one go. Saves dev time, has a lot of other advantages as well, of course. But you can imagine what happens if you get all the brightest minds of Ethereum into one room to kind of work together on something that they all share and they all benefit from. That's open source. So that's part of some examples. But let's go back to the analogy. So let's say you create let's say you're a modular system, right? Let's say you shared sequencing, for example. And you, in the warehouse analogy, let's say you make gear for warehouses. Like you make like a more custom uniform or something that's like better, more comfortable, that allows everyone in the warehouse to be able to work more efficiently, let's say. And you make this thing. In one reality, you would go and have this like new uniform, and you'd have to go and knock on like 50 different warehouses all over the world, hire like 50 people to help you do sales and BD and whatnot to kind of get your your tech integrated into a chain. In this case, because you have distribution through the superchain and the broader OP stack, you just knock on one door, right? You just go and be like, hey, OP stack, here's what I made. If it gets approved through governance and gets added to the protocol, you get access to it. Like that thing basically goes on all of the chains. So it saves you a lot of time. It allows you to spend more time on your product. And overall, like you just get distribution from day one. The other things you can share, if you're launching a chain, for example, are some of these other elements that are A little like, they're pretty broad. So one is like the Security Council. So you essentially benefit from this like big shared security system through Optimism Collective's governance. That is, you can read that proposal online. The other thing is Super Hack. So we actually ran this hackathon with ETH Global, Zora, Base, a bunch of other teams as well. And we had 1,000 developers, I believe, with about like 300 projects that were launched across all of these chains. As you're like starting a chain, I think a really hard thing is like, how do you get developers on this chain? How do we get folks to start using it? We do a lot of these shared Superchain things, so Superhack being one example, and many, many more to come. We actually have On-Chain Summit tomorrow. It's like a conference thing, and we also have Superchain Social as well later this week. So those are some extra things that we add. Another element that is very much at the heart of Optimism is retroactive public goods funding. So if I were to talk about that, essentially what that is how can we, to define a public good to begin with, there's many definitions. I like to use the definition that a public good is something that everyone uses that no one wants to pay for. But the fact that everyone uses it means it's very, very important. So how do you actually create a world where people are incentivized to create public goods and anyone can come in and use them? So Optimism, the Superchain, has a lot of open source tech. There's a lot of open source builders. If you're building a chain, chances are you might not have to worry about certain things that are closed off, right? Because there's this like big flywheel where open source is essentially like something that is rewarded through the collective. So that also applicable throughout all OP chains. So obviously like OP mainnet teams get it, but also teams building on Base. So these are like your app developers on your distinct chain. If you're a part of the Superchain, this is another thing you can share with the entire collective. Another analogy, I don't know, I think this is a repeat, but imagine why like a local area network would want to join the internet. And I think that's like a very condensed way to think about why Superchain. If you're building a chain and you want access to all the developers, like the Security Council, like RPGF, all of these like myriad of things happening on the broader Superchain, joining the Superchain is one way in which you can access it. So how to join? If you're launching a chain, there's a lot of roll-ups as service providers, of course, or you can self-host depending on whatever architecture that you want. And to join the Superchain, we have this extensive law of chains document. It's an opt-in process, of course. The MIT licensed open source like public good that Optimism is means you can essentially go and build your chain. But if you want the benefits that I kind of have talked about, the law of chains is a great read. It gives you a pretty in-depth summary of exactly how all of this works. And how to join as a modular team. So we do like Optimism RFPs. As you can see, there's a bunch here. There's like everything from the leader election, like shared sequencing thing, to ZK Proof. We have like two incredible teams like Mina, O1 Lab, sorry, and Risk Zero working on them right now. So what that means as well, on like to go back to the Superchain shared progress thing, is you are essentially using the OP stack. You're joining the Superchain, which has shared upgrades possible for every OP chain. And what that leads to is you actually are working on something that dozens of other devs are also working on, right? You kind of share like this massive mind space and mind share that's happening. You get that as someone who's building on the Superchain. So I think that's a pretty strong advantage for a team that's like trying to go with a stack that you don't want to be overly reliant on like one team for helping build and helping push. This is something that's a shared resource across all of Ethereum, essentially. So I'm going to speed run through some other points as well that are like kind of complementary. I'll try to be quick, so it seems like I don't have too much time left. But okay, let's see a few problems in crypto, right? So one problem right now is fragmented UX. This is literally the journey I had to tell my friend when I was trying to onboard them, right? So it's like, okay, go to a centralized agent, centralized exchange, KYC, load funds, wait 5 days for account hold, convert to another token, then use something to bridge and use another block explorer, click on the little Fox thing, check out this website, but make sure you go via their Twitter, because otherwise maybe it's a fake like scam link. You got to memorize what the Fox thing told you, your seed phrase, and otherwise you'll lose everything. Now go on this thing. Oh wait, it's not working. You got to switch to another network. Oh wait, you need a different native token here. You got to swap that again. You got to load up again. You got to go through the account hold again. It's a crazy, crazy UX, right? Like it is really tough. I was trying, my friend gave up, like, I think in the second sentence. But this is something that we can kind of fix. This is something that we can fix together. This is something that we can create this like Superchain system, which is an interconnected web across all of these blockchains to be one system. Users will feel like it's just using one large thing. Each chain obviously has their distinct properties, distinct user base, but we want to make sure that UX is a very, very big focus. Like, how can we fix this problem? We can't do it alone. This is something that if we have this shared resource, we can fix it together. Another problem. So, I was a big fan personally of the multi-chain world. Like, I thought it was really cool. I thought it was like, okay, various different chains, like, let's do this thing. There's a lot of cool ideas, a lot of cool products that can be like across this chain and that chain. And one thing that I realized though is some of the teams that were building multi-chain solutions were not able to spend as much time on their product as they may have wanted to, right? Because you have to integrate from one chain to another. You have to hire specific devs to integrate who know this certain code base. And it takes a long, long time to do that. With OP Stack, you don't have that problem because it's a shared code base. Again, it's like the same blueprint. So you have something on one OP chain, it's automatically in all of them as well because shared code base, you just have to deploy. So, hopefully when we look at like the multi-chain world and the superchain world, there's that difference where integration time is cut to basically 0. So every team can focus on the product and like delivering things to their users specifically without the back-end integrations that have to happen usually. Another problem is public goods. I think like we can all agree in crypto. I think the general amount of funding that's gone into the space is massive, but the amount of funding that's gone into education, the amount of funding that's gone into open source, really minimal, right? Like it's kind of a problem where if you ask anybody on the street like what is crypto, they still will not give the answer that I think all of us here have. And I think part of that is because we don't have the tools to fund public goods enough in order to incentivize people to go like create educational content, create YouTube videos, do all of these things that are really helpful on showcasing your work and showcasing what it is that we're all trying to do. And we believe that through RetroPGF, through the Superchain, we can kind of push this message forward and essentially just allow for the space to kind of have more content about what it's like, what we're really all trying to do here as well. Another problem is like why, this kind of goes into like why you might want your own chain. Your own sovereign block space is pretty nice, I think. Like, let's say you have a bunch of users and they love your product and they're really reliant on your product, but someone does an NFT mint that just like spikes up the gas and now no one can use it. That's not something that you'd want really, so having your own sovereign block space is something that helps. The other thing is also like, this is like the L2 fees chart currently. That is like a certain other benefit that you get as like, having your own L2. So I think to sum it up, we want to build this shared resource together. We want to be able to like push the space forward, but in a way that's like pro-sum for everybody. We want to create it in a way where it's not like it's capture resistant. You truly do own your own L2. You can opt into the Superchain. You can opt into the shared upgrades. You can kind of build this whole like big boat that we're all building together. And we're not just like expanding the pie. I'd say we're creating a whole bakery. So we can do that by essentially having everyone in the same spot, having shared standards, being able to work together, do super hacks, do Superchain socials, build on like this open source stack. So let's say like another example is just the ZK thing. There's certain way you can go about like having ZK added, which is one team that's like helping build a chain, hires like 50 ZK engineers, takes them like 6 months to onboard, then takes like a year to like launch something. Or you could have an open source stack that just allows for any ZK team that's been building this for 5 years to come in, integrate, and then get distribution from day one. So that's kind of, we're creating a bakery, sorry. And this is kind of a cheesy quote, but if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. But if you want to go fast and far, build a superchain. And this is a song that I wanted to outro to. I don't think I have quite enough time here, but it's called V-Buterin. It's on sound.xyz. I'm going to talk a little bit about NFT stuff here. This is a campaign that's live currently. If anyone has any artist friends, please apply. Please encourage them to apply. The goal here is like how can we actually create an art contest that happens to be on chain, and how can we use that to onboard people into crypto for the first time? So that's We Love the Art. I also have like this offer for everyone here. The Optimus NFT is this like non-transferable NFT that's basically your identity in the collective. It's kind of fun. Like you basically can create your character. It's like Sims if you've ever played that. So if you want to just scan the QR code, I'll leave it up for a bit. But thank you all for listening to me, and hope you enjoyed the show. I'm going to be talking.